What do you think of that? You stoked? You stoked? Let's see. All right, let's make sure things are good on the YouTube. So I saw something on the blogosphere that apparently YouTube is having some problems. So we'll see. Whenever someone sees this, say something in the chat so I know we're okay. It's going a little slower than usual, so we'll see what happens here. All right, it looks like we're healthy. It looks like we're healthy. Okay. All right. Okay. I had seen some things on the blogosphere that YouTube was having some issues, but it looks like we're healthy. Looks like the stream is good here. Yeah, it looks like the stream's good. I wore a shirt to match my curtain today. That's what I did. I just realized this now. I am feeling gray today. I guess it's a gray day, right? Sure. Why not? Hope everybody is doing awesome. Hope everybody is having a happy Tuesday. The best Tuesday. Really, Tuesday's a fun day, especially since we got some neat stuff in the news. I got to tell you, I had a pretty weird dream. That's something that happened to me. Had a pretty weird dream. So, in the world of stand-up comedy, there is a setup and a punchline to a joke, right? That's kind of the general thing. There's a setup and a punchline. I have always had the issue, and still do to this day, of sometimes my setups can be a little too long. Sometimes I get a little too wordy. I get a little too loose. I get a little too free form. And, whenever I'm doing longer sets, that'll especially happen because it's kind of a different animal doing a 45-minute set versus a 5-minute set. And when you live in a place like Los Angeles, it really forces you to really examine yourself and to really trim the fat, so to speak, and to really look at your act and see where the flaws are. And I'm noticing where my flaws are at more so than ever before. And the reason I bring all this up, I had a dream that a bunch of comedians I knew were making fun of me for having setups that were too long, and I never knew about it. And then I just overheard all of them. One of them was like, "Hey, I saw Placone do 45 minutes the other night. That was those 5 jokes were really funny. He did 5 jokes. They're really funny in 45 minutes. Someone else was like, "Hey, how long is it going to take me to get across town? I mean, is it going to be like 20, 25 minutes, or is it going to be like Ron Placone's setup long?" And I had all these things where they're saying all this about me, and I didn't get offended. I just realized, oh man, I really need to address this. Then I woke up and I told my fiance about the dream, and she goes, "So you basically roasted yourself in your sleep?" And I realized that's what happened. All these people were just comedians that I knew, but I don't know if they ever actually said any of that stuff. They probably didn't. And I just dreamt this where they're poking fun at my setup. So those were my 2 roast jokes that I literally roasted myself in my subconscious. Hey, I saw Ron Placone do 45 minutes. Those 5 jokes were really funny. 45 minutes is a long time. And if you're only telling 5 jokes, those are some really long 5 jokes. And then, of course, oh man, how long is it going to take me to get across town? Is it going to take me like 20, 25 minutes? Or are we talking Ron Placone setup time? That too. My subconscious wrote those jokes. My subconscious wrote those jokes about me. I roasted myself in my sleep. Speaking of entities that should be roasting themselves in their sleep, see how that transition worked? The DNC is at it again. So you guys have probably already seen this in the news. It's been around for a hot minute, but we're going to go there now. Edwin shares this, wants to remind us the DNC votes against a climate change debate. So a little bit of background. First, the DNC they didn't want to. But first, Sunrise Movement, one of the movements for climate change, they're working hard. They're touring the country. They're getting boots on the ground to protest and to try to make a difference and to rally. They pressured the DNC to have a climate change debate. They were originally successful. Now, the DNC, of course, is changing their tune to the surprise of nobody. So what's going on here? Let's go to the article from the Mercury News. Democratic National Committee votes against the climate change debate at the San Francisco meeting. This happened about a week ago. DNC members shot down an effort to hold a climate change-focused presidential debate Saturday in a victory for party leadership and a defeat for activists demanding a stronger focus on the environmental crisis. How do you feel if you're on the party leadership side. Like, how does that, like, it's so obvious you're the villain. This was a huge victory for people that just want to make the donors happy and don't care about our planet, and a huge loss for, people that want to stay on this planet. For people that kind of like life, they really lost this one. For people who like money and don't want to think about what's going to happen next, this was a victory. I mean, what a soft description too. Party leadership. They should just rename it donor quality assurance. All right, so party delegates voted 222 to 137. And protesters chanted, "We can't wait, failure of leadership," which it is. So party leadership, including DNC chair Tom Perez, strongly opposes the idea, insisting it would be unfair to elevate one issue over others. Let's talk about what that really means. What that really means is the candidates that they want to promote, they know this will make them look bad. That's what this really means. That's what they're really saying here. The candidates that they want to promote, the establishment candidates that they want to win, doing an actual climate change debate would give them a disadvantage. Why would it give them a disadvantage? Because other candidates would mop the floor with them. Joe Biden would be destroyed in a climate change debate by Bernie Sanders, by Tulsi Gabbard. Kamala Harris, same deal. She would get destroyed by Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. Basically, every candidate, except for Jay Inslee, he was pretty good on climate change, but he dropped out. So that's why they don't want to have one. That's the real reason they don't want to have a climate change debate. And here's what I had to say about it on Twitter. I said this. So Tom Perez goes, this is about something else. "I'm sick and tired of the empty rhetoric coming from Trump and the GOP on gun violence," which that's fair. "This epidemic is not inevitable. It is the price of inaction. Senate Republicans must join House Democrats in passing gun safety legislation." Now, that's a true statement. I, too, am sick of the empty rhetoric coming from Trump and the GOP on gun violence. The Democrats are also issuing empty rhetoric, and they have no plan either. So here's what I tweeted. "I'm sick and tired of the empty rhetoric from your party and the fact that you're shutting down a debate on climate change to protect your preferred candidates. The GOP is disgusting beyond measure, and they're able to be because of how weak the competition is." And that's true. That is true. When you think about the GOP and you think about how toxic the GOP is, I mean, Noam Chomsky called the GOP one of the biggest threats to humankind. The reason they're able to be so disgusting and so repulsive beyond measure is because their competition is the Washington Generals. They have no competition in the Democrats because the Democrats are just a corporate-friendly bought party too. So you have these incredibly weak people like Tom Perez leading them and shooting down a debate on climate change. Why? Because it would make their preferred candidates look bad. That is the only reason their preferred candidates would look bad in a climate change debate. It's not because, we don't want to play favorites on issues. You don't want to play favorites. How about the issue of we want to stay on this planet? How about that issue? No, they just don't want to make their candidates look bad. The establishment candidates, they don't want to make them look bad. Here's one of the candidates that they do not want to make look bad. Kamala Harris. Before Kamala Harris, this is from The Intercept, and Linus shares this with us over on the Reddit subsection, which, by the way, that's just reddit.com/r/getyournewsonwithron. If you want, drop an article in our Reddit subsection. I check it out each morning, and then I pull some articles from it for the show. This is one of the ones I pulled. This is from Linus. Before Kamala Harris soured on Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, she grew her email list from it. So a quick refresher, Kamala Harris said she was for Medicare for All. When she initially announced it, she sounded like she was in a church pew giving a confession. She was like, "I'm for Medicare for All. I just think in the richest country in the world, people shouldn't go bankrupt because of healthcare bills. I just think medical bills shouldn't cause bankruptcies. I'll still giggle while throwing people in jail, and I love prison labor, but I feel this way. I'm sincere. You can trust me on healthcare." And of course, she backpedaled multiple times. At the debates, She raised her hand high when they said, would you abolish private insurance? She raised her hand high. It was a misleading, misdirected question, but she raised her hand high anyway, said later that that was a misinterpretation and she's not for Medicare for all anymore. She is against Medicare for all, to the surprise of nobody. But here's one of the things she did before she was against it. Here's something. So Kamala Harris soured on Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill. She grew her email list from it. Before distancing herself from Senator Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All campaign, Kamala Harris repeatedly boasted her support for the legislation in Facebook ads in an effort to grow her list of supporters. Earlier this month, Harris backed away from Medicare for All during a private event in the Hamptons, telling a crowd of large dollar donors that she had not been comfortable with Bernie's plan. By large dollar donors, that of course refers to people with a lot of money in big pharma. That's what that's code for. People with money in big pharma. So why did Kamala Harris do this? Well, it's really simple. The people want Medicare for all. About 70% of Americans want Medicare for all. They're for it. Who's not for it? The donor class, big pharma, the people who buy off the politicians. So politicians like Kamala Harris, they're going to say they're for it. They're going to hope you remember that part. Then they're going to back away from it. And they're going to back away from it in front of the donors and their rich friends. As Hillary Clinton said, they got a public position and a private one. That's what she said about herself, and she was proud of it. Don't worry, donors. Don't worry, Wall Street. I have a public position and a private one. Well, they're following Hillary's lead. They got a public position and a private one. Kamala Harris has a public position and a private one. And it's not going to work, first of all. People are seeing through it. Also, we have the internet now, by the way. You realize we have the internet. We can go back. We can find stuff. People can get receipts real quick for their claims. So she's not comfortable with it now. Well, that means she's not for it. So people are going to know, it's going to be on the record that she's not for it. But in the meanwhile, she can spam a bunch of people. She can spam a bunch of people with her emails for her campaign. So, and I just don't understand. You know how backwards the whole argument is. Oh, well, you gotta have someone in the center to beat Trump. We need to have someone who's a moderate so they can appeal to more people and this and that. And, Joe Biden is the only one who can beat Trump because he has a good record reaching out across the aisle to Republicans. Okay, guess what? Half of this country does not vote. Half this country does not vote. You know why people don't vote? Why most people don't vote? Most people don't vote because they don't feel like there's an option on the ballot. So how does it make any sense whatsoever to make sure the candidates are as close together as possible when half the country doesn't vote because they don't really feel like there's an option on that ballot? Oh, half the country doesn't feel like there's an option on the ballot? Well, let's make two candidates as close together as possible. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are nearly the same candidate. Joe Biden talks nicer. That's the difference. Policy-wise, they're pretty much the same. Both against Medicare for all. Both against living wages. Both against doing anything about climate change. Both for fracking. Both against free college. Both against doing anything about Wall Street. Both against doing anything about the big banks. Both for war. And on immigration, they're basically the same. Joe Biden will just talk nicer when the cameras are on. When the cameras are on, Joe Biden will talk nicer. So yeah, let's just have two candidates that are exactly, because half the country doesn't vote because they don't feel like there's an option on the ballot. So we need someone who's most like Trump to beat him. That makes sense. That makes sense nowhere. It makes zero sense. Those are lies the establishment fed you. That's what that is. So, while Kamala Harris is changing her tune to appease the donor class, here's something Bernie Sanders was up to. Bernie Sanders picks up his first national union endorsement. And this was brought to us by R.F. Hartwell over on the Reddit subsection. This also comes from the Reddit subsection. Again, reddit.com/r/GetYourNewsOnWithRon. R.F. Hartwell, thank you for this. Bernie Sanders picks up his first national union endorsement. The United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers Union, the UE, shares his unabashed anti-corporate populism. Senator Bernie Sanders scored the first national labor union endorsement of his presidential candidacy on Monday. That was earlier this week, earning the support of the Pittsburgh-based, my hometown. Shout out to Pittsburgh, PA, 412, baby. The support of the Pittsburgh-based Union Electrical, Radio, Machine Workers of America, the UE for short. They go by the UE for short, right, Lucy? She's been chilling here this whole time. My co-host, Kat. Lucy, don't be too quiet. Pipe in when you need to, when you got something to say. You remember Pittsburgh. You spent some time there. Because she has. She's been through there with me a bunch. So anyway, the 35,000-member union among the country's smallest backs Sanders' 2016 bid and shares his unabashed anti-corporate populism. So they're backing him again. So here's what the UE General President Peter Knowlton had to say. Bernie understands the need for workers to have a democratic, independent union movement that is unafraid to challenge corporate America's stranglehold on our economy. Right on. So there we go. Bernie Sanders getting a union endorsement. As he should. In 2016, there were certain scenarios where certain unions, they didn't consult their members and they had ties to the Clinton administration and they just endorsed Hillary. Didn't consult their members and they had ties to the Clinton administration. Like I believe one of the teachers unions did that and they just endorsed Hillary because, hey, unions can certainly have corruption too. I am 110% pro-union. The show is a very pro-union show, but unions can have corruption too. That can certainly happen, and it does. And that's, for instance, where it did happen. Didn't consult their members, just endorsed Hillary anyway. And it turns out they had ties to the Clintons. That happened in some unions. So good for the UE in Pittsburgh, which, by the way, and again, that is radio, machine, and electrical workers. You know, here's a fun fact that I think not a lot of people know about. First radio broadcast ever in the United States, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Not just Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but about, how far would it be? Maybe a quarter of a mile away from where I grew up. It's really cool. There's this, Western Pennsylvania is a very hilly place. I lived in a very hilly neighborhood, as most people did, because, again, it's a very, very hilly place. And right near where I grew up, it's one of the highest kind of altitude points. Or would it be latitude? Altitude, I think is the right word. One of the highest altitude points in the area. And they made the first radio broadcast there. KDKA, which is still a media outlet in Pittsburgh. It's a fairly right-wing outlet, but whatever. We don't need to go into those details. But first radio broadcast ever happened in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right down the street from me. There was a mayor of the community I grew up in, a community called Forest Hills. One of the former mayors, a couple of them actually, who I full disclaimer, I do know both of them. One of them is no longer with us, unfortunately, but they really wanted to invest some money into kind of making this a site to be seen. Like there's a little lodge that you can rent out for private parties or events or whatever. And there's a little kind of plaque that talks about how, hey, the first radio broadcast ever happened here. Lucy's excited. She likes radio. She's like, you're talking about the first radio broadcast that happened down the street from my grandma and grandpa's house. That's what she's saying. She perked up for radio. There you go. She likes a lot of the vintage jazz shows. It helps her be a cool cat, huh? But anyway, so they wanted to make like a museum, essentially. They wanted to make, or at least some kind of like exhibit, make it free to the community, and have kind of a big memorial about radio. And there's this organization because one of the guys who started a lot of this stuff, he had this garage where he kept all the equipment. That garage is now, I believe, a Wendy's. But before the garage was torn down, a bunch of people that wanted to preserve this, they got everything from the garage and they've maintained it. And Lucy just got tired there. She was over it. She's like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to mess with the curtain too. That's what she did. Anyway, all right. So there you go. Bernie Sanders' first union endorsement, the UE in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my hometown, which also had the first radio broadcast ever in the history of the United States. Interesting little factoid there. All right. Let's see what else is happening. Oh, and thank you, R.F. Hartwell, for that article. All right, we got another piece of news pertaining to Bernie Sanders, and I am very, very excited to share this. So, you guys may remember, you guys may remember, oh, you guys may remember that I'm still going through puberty. I'm still going through it. I thought I was over by now. I'm still going through puberty. You guys may remember about a week ago or so on the show. I think it was either last week or the week before. It's not super detrimental, but we shared a video of Bernie Sanders in the 1980s, where Bernie Sanders was calling for more accountability in the media. And he was calling for, this was in the 80s, he was calling for more accountability in public television. And it's because he also called for a banning facial recognition in policing, which I was showing, hey, look, Bernie was kind of ahead of the curve in both scenarios here. He's the first 2020 candidate to call for a ban on facial recognition in policing, which is awesome. And here he was in the 80s confronting media consolidation in public television, which has since escalated big time in our current day and age. He was calling for transparency and accountability back in the 80s. So when it comes to media democracy, Bernie gets it. Bernie gets it. And here's another, for instance, of Bernie getting this one right. Check this out. Here's what Bernie wants to do. To fight corporate assault on journalism, Sanders unveils a plan to stop big media mergers and bolster independent news. Here's a quote. We cannot sit by and allow corporations, billionaires, and demagogues to destroy the fourth estate, nor can we allow them to replace serious reporting with infotainment and propaganda. Well, Bernie, I have some bad news for you there. That's already happened. I mean, I get it. He's got to play the game because he's running for office, but that has already happened, Bernie. And I'm pretty sure Bernie Sanders knows this. He puts up with the corporate media on a daily basis, which, again, whenever you find yourself rooting for a politician over a journalist, it's because the journalist is corrupt and the media has failed. And that's where we're at. You should never be rooting for a politician over a journalist, even if it's a politician you like. Even if you're like, well, I like Bernie Sanders, I like Tulsi Gabbard. Well, neither one of them are perfect. Both of them have made mistakes. Both of them have ticked me off about various things at times, and they'll tick me off in the future. They're not perfect. And when they make missteps, I should be rooting for the journalists to hold them accountable, to address it. But instead, journalists just go after clickbait. They go after surface-oriented smears and propaganda at the behest of the establishment. That's what they do to Bernie Sanders. That's what they do to Tulsi Gabbard. Neither candidate is perfect. Both candidates, there are valid points of criticism for both of them. Do you ever hear either of those valid points of criticism in the corporate press? No, you don't. You just hear cherry-pick smears for both of them, for the most part. Anyway, that's already happened, is my point. Getting back to the article. So, warning that the dissemination of journalism by big business and billionaire executives poses a major threat to democracy, Senator Bernie Sanders on Monday unveiled a plan to stop the long-running corporate consolidation of American media, take antitrust action against tech giants like Facebook and Google, and bolster independent news. So here's what he wants to do. Impose an immediate moratorium on federal approval of mergers of major media companies. Thank you. Thank you. You know, the latest merger, you know what's going on with these mergers now, like AT&T, Time Warner, and they're all merging, is that they're trying to take over streaming. That's what they want to do. All these media companies that are conglomerating and merging, it's because they have a video streaming service and they also have outlets. They want to combine that streaming service and those outlets. They want to take advantage of a post-net neutrality internet, which, again, we're fighting the front lines on net neutrality, but we technically do not have it. And they want to take over the streaming sphere because they know that that's the future. And they know that they need to take over the streaming sphere and make the internet look like cable television 2.0. And if they don't do that, they're done. So that's what they're trying to do. When you look at all these mergers, that's what you'll see in common. They have a lot of power as far as the outlets they own. And as far as the content they have first access to, and they have a streaming program of their own. They have their own video streaming program because that's what they're trying to do. So this bill would impose, this idea, this plan would impose an immediate moratorium on federal approval of mergers of major media companies. It will require media corporations to disclose whether their corporate transactions and mergers would cause significant layoffs of reporters. It will require that employees be given the opportunity to purchase media outlets through employee stock ownership plans. It would block federal merger and deregulation moves that harm people of color and women. It would reinstate and strengthen media ownership rules. Yes, with the goal of limiting the number of stations that large broadcasting corporations can own in each market and nationwide. Keep in mind, we used to have caps. We used to have caps on how much media one entity could own across the nation and how much media one entity could own in a given market. Then what happened? The Telecommunications Act of 1996 happened. Thanks, Bill Clinton. What did that do? That lifted all those protections. And that's why radio is now completely homogenized, because a couple companies, basically one company, Clear Channel, which is now Bain Capital, Mitt Romney's company, they gobbled up all the radio stations all over the country, and they just piped in right-wing radio everywhere and homogenized playlists, homogenized music. People lost their jobs everywhere. And it was just a homogenized Orwellian takeover of our radio stations. That's what happened because of Bill Clinton and the Telecommunications Act in 1996. So Bernie Sanders wants to put back some of the protections we used to have. All right, what else does he want to do? Enforce antitrust laws against tech behemoths like Facebook and Google to prevent them from using their enormous market power to cannibalize bilk and to fund news organizations. Thank you. Thank you. And we need to go a step further, and we need to designate them public utilities with an elected board overseeing issues pertaining to free speech on the internet. That's what we need to do. It needs to become a public utility with an elected board overseeing the way information is disseminated on those outlets. And what I mean by that is when people are posting on YouTube and Facebook, the free speech laws of the United States are upheld. That's what I mean when I make that statement. The last point, increase funding for federal programs that support public local media in much the same way other countries already fund independent public media. Basically, what he's calling for, in short, is that we're going to have a media structure in the United States. We don't have one right now. I mean, and again, and I've said this before, you guys have probably heard me say this before. I used to say that the media structure in the United States is toxic. I have since retracted that because I feel like that was actually an inaccurate statement. The most accurate statement is the United States doesn't have a media structure, and that's toxic. We don't. We just have a corporate giveaway of our airwaves and of our media. You look at cable news, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, none of them have any business in being in news and information, nor are they news and information outlets. They are PR firms for the people who own them. CNN is a PR firm for Time Warner. MSNBC is a PR firm for Comcast. And Fox News is just part of Rupert Murdoch's wet dream. It's not news and information. None of it. None of it is. Other countries, they have actual media structures where the government funds media. There are elected boards. There are transparency laws. Norway, which has the #1 ranking for press freedom in the world, they have very strict transparency laws. Media has to disclose who owns them. They have very strict laws on advertising. Like there's certain advertisers they cannot, like I'm pretty sure you can't even really advertise at all on news and information. So, those are media structures. That's a news structure. That's basically overseeing a news structure for the public good. Because in order for a democracy to work, citizens need to have access to quality information. There needs to be strong journalism. Journalism needs to be supported. And people need access to quality, accurate information to make choices. If you want people to get out and vote, that's something you need. The lack of media structure in the United States is ideal for a fascist regime. not a democracy. Our media structure and basic lack thereof, where it's just a corporate takeover, it's just a takeover of the oligarchy. It is ideal for a fascist regime, not a democracy. Bernie Sanders actually trying to do something about that. So there you go. All right. So here's something pretty cool. And this is what this is the last story of the day. John Blackman turned me on to this. And I kind of missed this when it happened. But so I'm a fan of the Beat Generation. I like a lot of that stuff. I liked On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I read it in college, and then I got into a lot of that other stuff. I read a lot of the other Beat stuff. I read Neil Cassidy. I read Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I read Howl by Allen Ginsberg. I read Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. I read, even though he's not a Beat, I read a lot of Bukowski, which was kind of that same era. I went through my Bukowski phase. And then, of course, I read some of the post-Beat stuff, but still kind of loosely inspired by, like, Hunter Thompson. I've been to the Beat Museum in San Francisco a couple times. And I missed that Lawrence Ferlinghetti actually turned 100 years old. So check this out. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the man who gave 1950 San Francisco its beat, he turned 100 years old this year. At the fresh old age of 100, Lawrence Ferlinghetti has gracefully outlived all of his flashier friends and contemporaries. He never disintegrated like Jack Kerouac. Never grew obsessed with his own mythology like Allen Ginsberg. This is according to the article, by the way. They're kind of putting down some of the other writers, but anyway, I'd rather just focus on hold on. Okay, here we go. Ferlinghetti never shrank from promoting socialist principles on the world stage as a poet, an activist, a publisher, and a businessman, repeatedly calling out the crimes of the American empire, from Eisenhower and Johnson to Obama and Trump. Ultimately, Ferlinghetti was always a better poet than a performer, and he always deployed his talents in support of world peace, equality, justice, and the democratic responsibilities we all share to produce the best art we have in us, however imperfect. So, the difference between Ferlinghetti and some of the Beats is that Ferlinghetti, and I think they all did to an extent, but some of them, they were like, we're outsiders, we're outside what's going on, in mainstream America. Whereas Ferlinghetti, he confronted power. He talked about social issues. He talked about issues of justice, and he really cared a lot. You know what I mean? I'm not saying the other ones didn't, but I think Ferlinghetti in particular was really confrontational about that in the contemporary sense and in the political realm. So here's what they have to say about his newest book. And again, 100 years old. So Ferlinghetti's new book is a slim, unpunctuated freestyle memoir, a final remembering of his life and work. Now, according to the article, it says, and almost certainly last. Hey, you know what? We don't know that. He's 100. Obviously he has more behind him than ahead of him, but he's got some time left. Who knows? He might have another book in him. You never know. But is there a reasonable chance this will probably be his last book? Yeah, there's a reasonable chance. But anyway, so it's a slim, unpunctuated freestyle memoir, a final remembering of his life and work. Throughout it, he characteristically avoids striking the pose of a great man, simply presenting himself in the image of a Chaplin-esque little boy, fumbling and striving to be better and more adult than he was, and always overshadowed by the vast historical conflicts he witnessed, from the Second World War through Vietnam and our endlessly never over till it's over War on Terror. Sounds like a cool book. Now it goes on to talk about City Lights Bookstore, how he went on to get involved with City Lights Bookstore, which is, of course, the bookstore in San Francisco that Lawrence Ferlinghetti, I believe he is still the owner, and it was a big hub for the Beat poets and the Beat generation. And the title of that book is Little Boy by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I'll be reading it shortly. Little Boy, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I recommend it. I will for sure be reading it shortly. I'll probably try to get it from the library soon. And thank you, John Blackman, for tweeting about this, because I missed that he turned 100. I just totally missed that. I didn't realize it. and I totally missed Lawrence Ferlinghetti turning 100. Now, I have, I guess technically, I have met Lawrence Ferlinghetti. It's not much of a story, but I was in San Francisco. It was my first time in San Francisco. I went to City Lights bookstore. It was the first and last time in my life, at least so far, that I spent 4 hours in a bookstore. I spent 4, and the time just flew. But I was reading different. I ended up buying a couple things, but it's a big store and they have reading areas. And I was just going section to section to section, and I was stopping and I was reading. And before I knew it, I had spent 4 hours in that store. And it was an amazing 4 hours. I'd do it again. But I left that store with my bag of books that I purchased. And who do I see walking by me but Lawrence Ferlinghetti? I was 21 years old. I had ratty shoulder-length hair. I was sweaty because it was a warmer day in San Francisco. I'd been traveling for a couple weeks. I had just graduated from college, and I wanted to see the West Coast for the first time. I'd never been to the West Coast before. When I finished college, I ended up going to Europe before I went to the West Coast of the United States. So I wanted to see the West Coast. I'd never been. So I went backpacking across the West Coast. Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Vegas, spots in between. And as I walked out of City Lights bookstore as a 21-year-old, or wait, I might have been 22. It's not that important. Who do I see there but Lawrence Ferlinghetti? And I realized that was Lawrence Ferlinghetti. My eyes lit up, and I waved to him. And he nodded and waved back. And I did not have the courage, or I don't know if courage is the right word, but I did not have the gumption to say anything to the man. I could have just, hey, you're really inspired. Thank you. Thank you for everything you do. And looking back on it, had that happened today, I would have done that. I would have been like, huge fan. Thank you so much. And that's it. But I didn't say anything. I just sheepishly waved and then moved on with my day. So anyway, that's that. Oh, and somebody in the chat, Lady gives a shout out to Powell's in Portland, Oregon, which Powell's is also one of my favorite bookstores in the country. Powell's, City Lights, those are pretty much my top two that I've been to. I know there's a lot of great ones that I have not even been to yet, but Powell's, City Lights, and then I got to give a shout out to Boxcar Books in Bloomington, Indiana, which I'm not sure if Boxcar is still there, but I have a lot of love for Boxcar Books in Bloomington, if it is still there. But yeah, I've been to Powell's. That's an amazing store. That's bigger than City Lights, a lot bigger, actually. Powell's is pretty amazing. If you're in Portland, Oregon, go to Powell's Books. You will not regret it. I promise. Guys, tour dates, I got them. We're going to the upper Midwest in about a week. Yeah, September 4th, we're going to be in Omaha, Nebraska. September 5th, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. September 6th, Madison, Wisconsin. September 7th, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Get your tickets for that. They're going fast. And September 8th, Iowa City, Iowa. We're hitting the upper Midwest, going to some smaller pockets, going to some bigger pockets. Get your tickets now. Do not wait. Romplacone.com. Romplacone.com. And November, we're coming to Australia. Don't wait on that. Get your tickets now. They are moving, we're so stoked. We're coming to Perth. We're coming to Adelaide. We're coming to Melbourne. We're coming to Sydney. That's Graham Elwood and myself on the Progressive Comedy Tour, a stand-up comedy tour. I will try to make sure those setups are not too long. Getting back to my self-deprecating dream that I had. All right. If you want to support this show on the sustainability end, please do consider becoming a patron. Patreon.com/RomPlacone. For a give what you can level, you get all kinds of exclusive content. You get my album in its entirety. You get dialogues between myself and Lucy. Get all kinds of fun stuff for a give what you can level. And you get post-show hangs. We do hangouts after the stream where I'm just kind of chilling on the stream and then you hop in the stream. It's not live, but it's like it's kind of like the green room after the show. We do that. Patreon.com/RomPlacone. You can give me an article idea, give me a guest idea. You can do whatever you want. Say whatever you want. Recommend some music to me. Recommend a book. And again, Little Boy Learns Ferlinghetti. That's the book recommendation for today. You know the drill. You know the drill. Jedi Mullet, thank you very much for the Super Chat contribution. This is good. Here's Jedi Mullet's Super Chat contribution. Thank you very much for that, by the way, Jedi Mullet. I still say Epstein was ran over by an F-150 driven by Brian Williams while listening to American Stank. Thank you very much for that, Jedi Mullet. American Stank, of course, was the band that started on Aggressive Progressives between myself, Graham Elwood, and Kim Iverson. That's our band. Thank you so much for keeping that inside joke alive. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Jedi Mullet. So thank you, Jedi Mullet, for the Super Chat contribution. Thank you, John Blackman, for the Ferlinghetti article. Thank you, Linus, over in the Reddit, for the article on Kamala Harris. Thank you, R.F. Hartwell, for the article about Sanders and the Union. And that was also over on the Reddit. Thank you, Edwin, for the DNC climate article. And Bernie Sanders trying to do something about media consolidation. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you so much for all your efforts in making Get Your News On with Ron possible. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. Also, tomorrow, not only will we be back for Get Your News On with Ron at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, but at 2:30 Eastern Time, 11:30 Pacific, I will be interviewing Mark from Demand Progress about the net neutrality pledge for 2020. So that's going on. There's going to be two things going on tomorrow, our regular stream and an interview afterwards as well. Thank you guys for making this possible. And in the meantime, you know the drill. She's up here. Here, Lucy, look up for a second. There we go. See, she's here. She's kind of chilling, kind of zen. There she goes. You know how it goes. Lucy says meow. I say peace. See you tomorrow. Peace.